Montgomery County, Maryland. The branches of the trees leaned together, the sound of leaves fading away in the wind. Here, just an hour north of D.C., was a land where nothing seemed to happen. But once upon a time, there was a man who spent 3 nights there. No one knew where he was during those 3 nights. He didn't answer the phone. He didn't talk. There were no cameras. There were no records. There was just a notebook. And that notebook was found 30 years later, September 2023. Derek Langley, a local history researcher and nature documentarian, found an old cabin during his project on abandoned forest structures. The woodwork was rotten, the roof had collapsed, and there was a white sign on the front door that had been half erased, K9 to 13. When he went inside, he found a forgotten table under a blanket of dust, an overturned stove, and a notebook pressed down with a rock. There was no writing on the cover of the notebook, but when he opened it, there was only the date on the first page, March 16, 1993, and 3 words below it, "No talking today." At first, Derek thought the notebook belonged to a hunter who had escaped into the wild, or a loner. But as he turned a few pages, the handwriting began to look more familiar. Clear, orderly, dominant, yet simple. A small inscription on the 3rd page caught his attention. "Today I silenced a dream. I want to take it to Washington. But first I must suppress the buzzing inside me." And in the lower left corner of the page, a faint but clear pair of letters, B.O. Derek thought those initials belonged to an ordinary person. But one evening when he read a few lines from the notebook out loud during a conversation with friends, a friend's face tightened. "This is, like," he said, "it sounds like Obama's writing style when he was young." Derek laughed at first. But the next morning, he began researching old Obama articles from the 1990s. And the similarity was striking. The writing style was almost identical. He digitized the notebook and sent it to Dr. Helen Strauss, a letter expert. The report that arrived 2 days later said, "The handwriting is a 91% match to Barack Obama's documents from 1990 to 1996. The writing style, letter slants, spelling habits, and line alignment confirm a unique writing style." This was no longer a guess. This was evidence. Obama had spent 3 nights in this cabin in 1993. But why? The contents of the notebook changed as the pages progressed. The first line from the night included this note: "Someone told me today, nobody trusts you. They may be right, because sometimes I don't even trust myself." And then, "I didn't run away, but as long as I stay here, no one is watching me." The mood was darker in the pages from the second night. "I dreamed of my father all night long, but his face was blurred. He reached out his hands, but I didn't. Perhaps I am here not to make peace with him, but to get out from under his shadow." This line was almost a perfect fit for the themes in Obama's first book, but the language in this notebook was cruder, more honest. It was like an inner voice, purged of political filters. The writings of the 3rd night were different. It was as if a decision had been reached. "I am ready to return now, but this time I will not return alone. Every question I carry inside me I will ask the public one day, and I will not stop talking until they answer." And the final sentence: "If anyone finds this notebook, they should know that I didn't speak for 3 nights, because my silence was my loudest." Derek didn't release the notebook to the press. First, he decided to match it with historical records. Where was Obama in 1993? According to the records, Obama was practicing law in Chicago in March of that year, while also providing consulting services to various organizations. But there were no official documents from March 14th to 19th. Those days were blank on the calendar. And more interestingly, a letter from Obama was found in which he stated that he felt invisible at the time. A few weeks later, the existence of the notebook couldn't remain secret. A friend of Derek's shared a screenshot on social media without permission, and it quickly made headlines. "Obama disappeared for 3 days in 1993, diary revealed." Silent cabin, the former president's most secret moments. There was no official statement from the White House, but one of Obama's former advisors, known for his closeness, told reporters, If this notebook is real, those 3 days could be not only a turning point in Obama's life, but also a beginning. Now everyone was asking the same question: why? Why would a man stay in a cabin in the woods for 3 days without leaving a trace? Why would he write down the silence? And why wouldn't he tell anyone about it for 30 years? After Derek found the notebook, he didn't share it with anyone for weeks. But after the notebook was leaked, he was no longer in control. The press, political historians, and social media were awash with speculation, but no one had access to the entire notebook. The leak was only 3 to 4 pages. In Derek's desk drawer, there was still a truth lost among those pages, and there were some lines that even reading them out loud made you feel like you were violating a secret. For example, on page 5 of the notebook, the writing was freer, the sentences were shorter, the commas were out of place, the lines were overlapped. But one sentence was clear: when did I really become Barack? And why don't I remember that moment? It was a question of identity, and this question revealed Obama's mental conflict in 1993. There was another interesting gap in Obama's known resume from that period. His presence at the Chicago nonprofit Public Allies during the second week of March 1993 was not documented. He was also not recorded as having met with several Harvard professor friends during that same period. So, he was really lost. He was not at work, not in town, not in a meeting, not traveling. He was just there, in the cabin. A name appeared in the notebook as it progressed. It was written only once: Malik, Obama's half-brother. Malik Obama was living in Kenya in 1993, but he had come to the United States briefly at that time. That information was included in a passport record. Derek could only think of one possibility. Maybe Obama had spent those 3 days with him. But Malik's name appeared in only one line in the notebook. Malik brought the letter. The contents were heavier than I expected. Maybe that's why I kept quiet. Maybe it was because I still thought it was my father's voice. When Derek read that line, he shared the file with his archivist friend Rachel Min. Rachel had researched private letters Obama had written in the 1990s, and Rachel said, that letter Malik brought in 1993 was most likely an unsent letter from their father, Barack Sr. The contents of that letter have never been made public, but it is known that such a document exists in the family archives. A sentence on another page in the notebook seemed to confirm this. When those lines reached me, I wanted to be alone, because for the first time, a father had understood that his son was late without his son telling anyone. This feeling of loneliness pointed to one of Obama's inner collapses, and the 3 nights he spent in that quiet cabin represented a kind of mourning and perhaps a pardon. Derek could no longer keep the notebook alone, but he didn't want to give it to the press directly, so an independent panel of archives was formed. It consisted of a 3-person history expert, 2 handwriting analysts, and an ethics consultant. The panel reviewed the notebook and determined 3 things. The writing was most likely Obama's. Its content was personal, not political, but spiritual. Its publication would have been unethical if done without permission. But at the time, The Atlantic, one of the largest publications in the U.S., published an exclusive report. The 3 days Obama disappeared, what's coming now? The report included a new paragraph that had been leaked. If I ever speak, it will not be for people, it will be for my silences. Because it was not the words that shaped me, but the echoes I didn't hear. These lines seem to explain why Obama had stayed in the cabin for 3 days, why he hadn't told anyone, why he had only written in a notebook. Rachel turned to Derek and said, "This notebook is not a manifesto. It is the whisper of an adult trying to understand the emptiness inside a child." 2 weeks later, an unofficial statement came from Obama's office. The spokesman, who asked to remain anonymous, shared only the following sentence: "Yes, that notebook is mine, and those 3 nights were the silence that told me who I was." But the public was not satisfied. Everyone wanted to know exactly what had happened during those 3 nights. And one question in particular stood out. What did that letter say? The notebook contained only this line: "I wrote you the letter when I was young, but it didn't reach you. Maybe your older self will understand it better than your younger self." Obama repeated this sentence years later, but no one knew at the time where it came from. Rachel confirmed the authenticity of the letter, but the original copy has still not been made public. For Derek, this had become a personal story. It wasn't just an old notebook. It was 3 nights of one man alone with the darkness inside him, and maybe the answers to the questions that lay hidden in that silence were only on the final page. That page had still not been shown to anyone. It had not been leaked. It had not been read. And Derek, he would only open that page on one condition: when we are ready for real closure. Derek closed and reopened the notebook several times before opening the last page. It was delicate, as if he were touching a person's heart, not the paper. That page held something no social media post or TV discussion could match: true silence. The edges of the page were less worn than the others, because that page had never been turned. In other words, it had been written but never read. And now, 30 years later, someone would read those lines for the first time. There were only 7 lines on the last page of the notebook, but each one was the kind that sharpened a person's inner voice. I lay awake on my last night. I hear my own voice over and over again, but it doesn't come from the outside. My father was the shadow of a life I never lived. Now I live his silence. I read his letter, and I have no answer for him. But maybe one day my son will come to this cabin, and he will be the answer. Derek didn't get up from where he was sitting for a long time after reading the page. It was as if he had witnessed both the past and a father. When Obama wrote these lines, he was neither a leader nor a politician. He was just a son, a young man who had not been recognized by his father and who had difficulty recognizing himself over time. Derek put the notebook in an envelope, and he took it directly to Obama's office, not by mail. The building security didn't let him in at first, but Derek showed the note in his hand. If this page is to be closed, it should be closed by its owner. After waiting for an hour, the notebook was taken in by a special representative. No explanation was given back to Derek, but 3 days later, an envelope arrived at Derek's house. It just said, "Montgomery Notebook, closing note." When he opened the envelope, there was one page inside. The handwriting was familiar, clear, orderly, plain, just like in the notebook. The text read, "I lost the notebook for 30 years. But what I found now is not the page. It is my own voice. Silence did not lock me in a room. On the contrary, it saved me from the lies in the crowd. If my son ever asks me who I really am, I will tell him not about this notebook, but about this silence." There was no signature, but there was no need. A few months passed. Obama never directly mentioned the notebook in any interview, but in a university speech, the closing sentence stood out. Sometimes the answers are not in the books. Sometimes they echo where one does not speak. After that speech, a new donation was recorded for the Archives Center at Columbia University. The title, Montgomery Journal, Restricted Access. Access was only by special permission, but the document inside proved that silence could finally be spoken. Derek never went back to the land where the cabin stood, but in the summer of that year, locals erected a small sign in front of the cabin. It simply read, "Nothing was said here for 3 nights." But the most talked about thing in years came from here, and from that day on, young people who came to the cabin learned to sit quietly. No one spoke loudly, no one took selfies there, because it was no longer the memory of a story but of silence. Finally, a line from a digitized copy of the notebook was hung in an exhibition at Harvard. The sentence was, "Some letters go unanswered, but some silences speak for themselves."